Good evening. I'd like to show you some of the color adjustments that I have been learning about in Adobe Photoshop. Right now I am in Bridge and I have chosen my raw file that I would like to work with. So I'm going to open it here and it will open in Camera Raw. The first thing that I'm going to do is just do some various adjustments to the picture itself. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to hold down my Alt key. I'm on a Mac. I'm going to check my exposure. There's not much clipping in the highlights, and I'm going to check for recovery. There's really not much clipping in the shadows either. So I'm going to check and add just a little bit of fill light. Sometimes I like to go over and then come back down. Brightness, I'll leave it about 50%, although if we take this down just a little bit, we won't lose as much of the color in the upper spectrum. So for clarity, I usually always drop this, bring this up to about 20%. And vibrance, I'm going to pull out a little bit of color in some of the tones. At this point, I usually jump over to the sharpening tab. If you take a look here at about 200%, you can see that I could use a little bit of sharpening in the textures here. I'm going to hold down my Alt key. I typically start at about 34-35%. For my radius, again, holding down the Alt key, I think I'm going to leave that at about 1.3. The detail, again, holding down the Alt key. And the masking, I'm going to bring that up to pull off just a little bit of that. So just check the difference. I don't know if the recording is going to show it. There's just a slight difference. Enough that this area here, there's a lot more detail that comes out. The other thing that I've often been doing as of late is applying the lens correction. I'm using my stock lens on my D7000, which often has a little bit of vignette. You can see some of the darker color here, especially. So I take that in. It's picked up my lens and my camera, all that information from the raw file. So at this point, I'm not going to add any grain, make any color correction. So I go ahead and open the image in Photoshop. Now when I get to this image, one of the things that I see is it has a little bit of a blue tint, like the rocks have a blue tint to it. So what I want to do here is I'm actually going to add a curves adjustment. So I'll go ahead and add my curves adjustment layer. But I want to base my curves adjustment, because again, I have an overall blue tint to the picture. I want to take and base my curves adjustment on the blue, the water itself. You can kind of see that it all has like a blue hue to it. So I'll come up here to my curves adjustment tool, and again, I don't know all the technical names for these things. I'm just learning, but over here under my color tool, I'm going to create a color sample, and I'm going to zoom into this water area, and I'm going to try and find like 3. Okay, we can stop zooming. Come on. 3 different levels of blue that I want to adjust to. I'm going to pick the a light blue, a medium blue, and a dark blue. Now you can see actually before I do that, so come back over here and I'm going to click that curve tool and I'm going to zoom into these areas, and I'm going to hold down my Shift and Command key, and I am going to, you can see over in the left hand or the right hand side here, as I roll over, you can actually see it identifying where on the curve these points are. So I'm going to hold the Command and the Shift key, and I'm going to right click and Command and Shift key and right click and Command and Shift key and right click on all 3 of those parts. And when you go to each of the individual color channels, you can now see that there have been individual points that have been placed on the curve for each of the color channels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to adjust these colors. So when I come in here and I look over on my info for the color samples that I've taken, I'm going to take and find the color channel that has the medium numerical value. So in this case, I'm looking at, for this color sample 1, I'm looking at 36, so 236. So what I actually want to do is I want to take my adjustment tool and I want to select it, and I want to come over to sample 1, and I'm actually going to click and drag. And again, I've chosen my red channel right now. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to actually bring that. Now, as I slide my mouse up, it's very slight. You see, you probably have a hard time seeing it, but you can see the adjustment of the red channel going up, and I'm going to move that up to 236. Now I'm going to do that for this point here, the red channel. My medium is 220, so for point 2, I'm going to right click and I'm going to move that up to about 220. Now as I'm doing this, you're going to see the colors are going to start to look out of whack until I've adjusted all the channels. But so in point 3, 178 is my medium, so I'm going to come up here to adjust to about 178. Now, okay, so I've done that, and my blue, on my red channel, now you can see that the everything has a real reddish hue, but don't worry about that because we're going to fix it. So if I zoom there, so now we're going to take the green, and my green actually was approximately the medium here, so I'm not going to touch it. And color sample 1, it was the medium here in color sample 2, and it was the medium, so I'm not actually going to end up adjusting my green. So I'm going to come over to my blue channel, and in sample 1 I'm going to actually right click and drag it down to about 236 roughly, and doesn't want to stay right there on 236, but so for 2 I'm going to drag that down to about 220, and for sample 3 I'm going to drag it down to about 178. Now what this is going to do is give me more of a neutral look to my overall picture. If I go ahead and zoom back out now, you will see that I don't really have a neutral. The doesn't actually look good at all. So I'm going to check out my adjustments here. You can see that I've gotten rid of a lot of the blue hue, but it hasn't had the net results that I'm looking for because I've lost all of my green up in there. But I'm going to come over and check out the green, because one of the things that I could do with the adjustment layer as well is pull in and make overall adjustments. Also take the okay. So one of the things I notice when I'm looking at my histogram, and of course, this is all a learning thing, but I see that somehow I had an extra point that got added to my curve. So I'm going to pull this back in. And I think now we're going to see this is a lot better. Okay, so this is the color adjusted, and this was the original. As you can see that the original had a blue tint, to the entire picture, but after I've done my curves adjustment, and again, I'm not sure how that stray, and I could probably somehow delete that point, but I haven't learned how to do that yet. But with the adjustments, you can see I've got now more of a natural color, although I've taken a lot of the blue tint out of the green grass and the brown rocks, but now my water itself has kind of lost that, more of that, I don't know what you'd call it, just more of the solid blue. So what I'm actually going to do it here is I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to add a mask to the selection, and I'm going to go ahead and mask out the sections of the water that I don't. Now, if you're not familiar with masks, I'm going to use my brush tool, and I'm not going to put my watermark on here. Just take and paint. And with masking, when you black, what you actually do is you mask out the modifications that you've made in the layer. So you can see here as I'm taking and drawing in black, it is returning that blue color to the water. So I'm going to go around here, and in the areas of the water, I'm going to mask out the color adjustments. I'm a little slow, but we'll get it done. Kind of feel like Bob Ross right now, although obviously with a lot less skill. I wonder what Bob Ross could have done with Photoshop. Anyway, we'll finish painting this back in by masking it out. Now, as you do this, you can actually see down here on my screen that the mask is being painted in, to again mask the adjustment layer that I've made. I think we're looking pretty good. I mean, probably is some more touch-up that needs to be done. I think if I check over here. Look, this was off the screen, so I didn't even get it. So you can see, again, I don't know what the quality of the recording, if you can actually see, but you can see how where I ran the mask and where I haven't run the mask over here, there is a color difference. So I've lost that blue, so I'm going to paint that mask back in. So now that we are done with that mask itself, I am going to zoom out just a little bit. Now here is the original picture, and here's the updated picture. So you can see in adding this this curves adjustment layer, and choosing my sample colors and bringing in a little bit more neutral tone, I was able to pull the overall the blue hue out of the picture. Now I'm sure there are plenty of other ways to do this. There are adjustment layers where you can actually adjust your hue and saturation. But anyway, so here is again my picture, the original picture, and the adjusted picture. So there are a lot of other things, like when I look at this, I kind of have a green hue up to these mountains. I might also want to come in and mask that out again. Let me actually take a look at this. I can I didn't want to create a clipping mask. I want to add mask to selection and take my paintbrush. kind of paint that back in here. So, again, I'm giving it a little bit more of that blue. But it's in the sky and it's off in the distance, and it was a little bit of a hazy day, so it's probably a little more natural that it has that blue look to it. So there we go. Now again, I'm sure that there were much easier. I've been using Photoshop for about 2 months now. I'm sure there are many other ways to do this, probably even a lot simpler ways. There might even be some actions that are out there that you could run. But I wanted to take a few minutes and just record an example of how you can use the curves adjustment layer to adjust some of your colors and make your pictures look even more natural. Thank you.